Sometimes I catch myself wondering how life might have unfolded if my father hadn't died that spring morning. I was only 6, but that day is etched into my memory like a scar that never fades. He was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, his signature Sunday ritual. He always made them into silly faces, complete with blueberry eyes and syrupy grins. It never failed to make me giggle. Mom would be at the table, humming some tune I can't recall anymore, her voice as soft as the morning light. Funny how the smallest moments become the loudest echoes. You never know which ones will mark you forever until you're standing in the silence they leave behind. "Lily Princess, come help your old man flip these masterpieces," Dad called, brandishing the spatula like a wizard casting spells. I leapt off the couch, abandoning my favorite stuffed bunny, and ran toward the warmth of the kitchen and straight into the moment that would shatter everything. The spatula clattered to the floor. Dad's hand flew to his chest, his expression twisted with agony. The rest unraveled in a blur, screaming sirens, the cold sterility of hospital walls, my mother's sobs. Just like that, he was gone. And the house that once buzzed with laughter suddenly felt too big and far too quiet. But my mother didn't stay buried in grief for long. She met Richard at a support group for widows and widowers. He had gentle eyes, the kind that softened around the edges when he smiled, so much like my father's that it hurt to look at him for too long. A year later, they married, and Richard moved in. I was only beginning to adjust to this new man in our lives when Mom sat me down, her face glowing with excitement. She was pregnant. "You're going to have a baby brother, sweetheart," she beamed, eyes dancing. Tommy was born when I was 8, and that's when things truly changed. Mom quit her job as an elementary school teacher. "Tommy needs me," she would say whenever anyone asked. A child needs his mother in those early years. I wanted to ask if I'd needed her in mine, but the words stuck, thick and hot in my throat. So I watched in silence as my mother's world shrank, until everything in it orbited around Tommy. She started forgetting my school lunches. When I came home hungry and complained, she'd blink at me like I'd spoken another language. "Oh, I'm sorry, honey," she'd murmur absently, already back to doting on Tommy. "Today was his doctor's appointment. I've just been so busy." It happened more than once. It became the new rhythm of our lives. Richard noticed. I saw the way he watched her, concern tugging at his brow, as she rushed to meet every one of Tommy's whims, as if the rest of us didn't exist. One night, I was bent over my desk, struggling through math homework, when Richard pulled up a chair beside me. "You know, Lily," he said gently, guiding my pencil across the page. "Sometimes people get so focused on one thing, they forget what else they might be missing." As Tommy got older, the tension only deepened. Richard tried to talk to Mom to help her see how unbalanced things had become, but the conversations always spiraled into the same storm. I remember one dinner vividly. Tommy, 5 at the time, was pushing peas around his plate, and Mom was practically begging him to eat. "Sarah," Richard said, setting down his fork, "we need to talk. You can't baby him like this. He needs to learn to do things on his own." Her face hardened. "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" "That's not what I said," Richard replied, voice calm but firm. "But you have 2 kids, and a husband." I stared at my mashed potatoes like they held the secrets of the universe, ears wide open. "Tommy needs me," she snapped. "He's still little." I was little, too, I whispered to myself. But as always, no one heard. Things hit a breaking point when Richard suggested signing Tommy up for a youth baseball league. I was on the stairs pretending to do homework when I heard the fight erupt in the kitchen. "No way!" Mom's voice was sharp, indignant. "Do you know how dangerous that is? He could get hit with a bat, twist his ankle, break something." "For God's sake, Sarah," Richard cut in. "He needs to live, to fall down and get back up. You can't bubble wrap him forever." But she didn't budge. Instead of baseball, she enrolled him in an art class. I still remember him sitting there, bored out of his mind, dragging a brush across the paper while the other kids poured their hearts into their drawings. After 3 sessions, he quit. Mom blamed the teacher. "She just doesn't get his creative spirit." Meanwhile, Richard started showing up for me. Maybe he was trying to restore balance, or maybe he simply saw a lonely child in need of someone who noticed. He took me to karate 3 nights a week, cheered louder than anyone when I earned a new belt. With his encouragement, I started to thrive. But while I grew stronger, Tommy unraveled. His room looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes, toys, broken crayons everywhere. And then came that look. The one from Mom. "Lily, be good. Clean Tommy's room," she'd say, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Until Richard found out. "She's not his maid, Sarah," he said sharply. "He has to clean up after himself." That's when Mom played her trump card. Tears. "I knew it. You love her more than your own son. How could you?" I saw the flicker in Richard's eyes dim, the fire in him flicker out. He looked at me, guilt, apology, surrender in his gaze. "Do as you please," he murmured. And just like that, he stopped fighting. But he never stopped seeing me. That at least was something. Graduation day tasted like ash in my mouth. I spotted Richard in the crowd, his eyes full of pride. Mom was there too, barely, her attention glued to her phone, probably checking in with Tommy's nanny. Later that evening, Richard called me into his study. "I've been saving," he said, sliding a folder full of college brochures toward me. "You can go anywhere, Lily, anywhere you want, no boundaries." But before I could even respond, my mom stormed into the room. "You can't be serious," she snapped. "That money should go toward Tommy's future. He needs it more." Richard's face hardened in an instant. It was a look I'd come to recognize, a quiet, simmering resolve. "It's not up for debate, Sarah," he said, voice clipped. "I've made my decision." I ended up choosing Marshall University in West Virginia, far enough to breathe, to begin again, but not so far that I couldn't come home, if I ever wanted to. When Richard drove me to the dorms, he carried every box like it weighed nothing. Mom didn't come. Tommy had spiraled into a fit of separation anxiety at the thought of her leaving him, and she stayed behind to calm the storm. College was exactly what I needed. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten child living in someone else's shadow. I was just Lily, free. I called home every week, but it was always Richard who picked up. Mom was perpetually busy with Tommy. "He's going through a rough patch," Richard said one day, his voice heavy with fatigue. "Fell in with the wrong crowd. I tried getting him into clubs, but your mother—" "Let me guess," I cut in. "She accused you of being too strict?" "Exactly," he sighed. "Called me a tyrant, all because I think the boy needs a little discipline." My visits home grew fewer, and when I did show up, Tommy barely acknowledged me. He was always holed up in his room, locked away behind glowing screens. The few times I caught a glimpse of him, he looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, radiating anger, as if the world had let him down somehow. After graduation, I took a job with the Department of Energy's consulting division and stayed in West Virginia. I worked hard, built something for myself. Meanwhile, Tommy dug deeper into his digital fortress, retreating from the world entirely. One visit, I knocked on his door, balancing a plate of sandwiches in one hand. "Tommy, want some lunch? My treat." The only reply was the crackle of gunfire from his game. Mom passed behind me and glanced at the closed door. "He's not in a good headspace today," she said, already walking away. "He's really stressed." The contrast between our lives was blinding. While I was earning promotions, Tommy was racking up virtual victories, and Mom was still making excuses as if enabling him were a full-time job. Richard saw it. I could feel his frustration growing like a storm behind his eyes, but by then, even he had stopped pushing back. By 27, I'd saved enough for a down payment on my own place. Just a studio apartment in a decent neighborhood, but it was mine. When I picked up the keys, I couldn't stop smiling. Years of microwaved meals and discount clothes had brought me here. "You've all got to come see it," I said during our weekly house call. "I'm having a housewarming next Saturday. I'll cook. Lasagna, Richard. Your favorite." "I wouldn't miss it, kiddo," he said, voice warm. But then Mom butted in. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think we'll make it. Tommy has plans that day." My eyebrow arched. "What plans?" "Very important ones," she said vaguely, as the muffled sounds of Tommy's latest game echoed behind her. On the day of the party, only Richard showed up. He brought a potted plant and a bottle of wine. "Your mother sends her love," he said with a crooked smile. We both knew that was a lie. Over dinner, he finally opened up. "Tommy's 20 now," he said, swirling pasta around his fork. "Still no college, no job, just gambling and those damn drinking buddies." He sighed. "I offered him a position at my firm. Nothing fancy, just a way to get started. But Sarah, she said it was beneath him," I finished. Richard gave me a weary smile. "She thinks hard work is somehow insulting. Says her son's too gifted for manual labor. Too smart to lift a hammer, but not too smart to freeload," I muttered. "I keep trying, Lily," he said, voice low. "God knows I keep trying." That was the last truly honest conversation we ever had. 2 years later, the call came, the kind that cracks the world open. Richard collapsed at work. A massive heart attack, just like my father. By the time I got to the hospital, it was over. His funeral didn't feel real. None of it did. Mom sobbed dramatically in front of everyone, clutching her pearls and spinning tales of a love story that never really existed. "We were so happy," she cried. "How will we go on without him?" I watched her performance with a strange mixture of contempt and sorrow. She wasn't crying for Richard. She was crying for herself. Behind the mascara-streaked tears, I could see it. Panic. How would she support Tommy now? Richard had been the last financial pillar holding up their crumbling castle. Tommy didn't even bother to dress for the occasion. He slouched into the service in wrinkled khakis and a threadbare hoodie. Didn't look up once. His eyes were glued to his phone, thumbs tapping through whatever game he refused to put down. And Mom, ever the apologist, whispered, "He's just processing in his own way. He's really hurting." Standing at Richard's grave, I realized I'd come full circle. Another father figure, another heart attack, another cold plot of earth. But this time, I wasn't a child. This time, I saw the truth. Mom's grief had more to do with dwindling bank statements than a broken heart. In the year that followed, I lost touch with her and Tommy almost entirely. Everything I heard came through Aunt Linda in hushed, uncomfortable phone calls. "They're getting by," she'd say, living off what Richard left. "Sarah sold his truck last month, and his tools before that." I tried to stay indifferent. I really did. But then, on a quiet Tuesday night, my phone lit up with her name. "Mom." "Lily," she said. Her voice, smaller, weaker, didn't sound like hers at all. "Please, Come." There was something in her tone that made my decision for me. I booked a ticket that night. When I pulled up to the house the next morning, I barely recognized it. The yard Richard once meticulously trimmed was now an overgrown jungle. The paint on the windows peeled in jagged flakes. One shutter dangled pitifully, barely hanging on. But it wasn't just the house that looked like it had aged decades. When my mother opened the door, I nearly gasped. The once vibrant, polished woman now looked hollow. Her face had caved in on itself with deep lines. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, now showed stubborn gray roots, peeking through like ghosts. "Come in," she murmured, leading me into the living room. The air was stale, thick with the scent of neglect. Dirty dishes towered in the sink, and a fine layer of dust clung to every surface. It was hard to reconcile this with the woman who used to make me rewash an entire load of plates because of a single water spot. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, settling onto the couch. A spring jabbed into my thigh, a little imperfection Richard would have fixed before it became noticeable. She broke down almost instantly. Tears welled up and spilled over, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We're running out of money, Lily," she said, hands fluttering in a useless, desperate motion. "My pension doesn't cover the bills anymore, and the savings. They're gone." "And Tommy? Is he helping at all?" Her face hardened, equal parts embarrassment and defensiveness. "He's trying. He's looking for work. It's just, people don't understand him." I raised an eyebrow. They don't understand punctuality or hard work? At his last job, he had to be in by 8. Tommy, who's allergic to mornings and responsibility. Even before that, he whined about lifting boxes like it was a human rights violation. "But he's so smart." My jaw clenched. "Mom, he's 30. No degree, no experience, no drive. Being smart doesn't mean anything if you don't use it." "You don't understand anything," she snapped. That tone, it was always reserved for me whenever she felt the need to defend Tommy's mediocrity. But then, suddenly, her voice softened. "Lily, we need your help." There it was. "I hate to ask, but you do so well for yourself. We can't manage without you." Part of me wanted to laugh bitterly, to remind her how many times she picked Tommy over me, how I was always the backup plan. But I looked at her, her gaunt face, trembling hands, that quiet shame in her eyes, and I couldn't say no. "How much?" When she said $1,500 a month, I nearly choked. That wasn't a favor. That was a second rent. Still, I nodded. "Where's Tommy now?" She brightened. "Job interview, a very promising IT position." I turned to look at his window. The soft flicker of a computer screen was visible through the curtain. Some things never change. True to my word, I set up the transfer. Every time I saw the debit on my statement, I reminded myself, you're doing the right thing, even if it meant no new car, no bigger apartment. I started visiting more often, but every time felt like rewinding my life. Tommy, unchanged, still glued to the screen or sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. "How's the job search?" I'd ask. "None of your business." Sometimes he'd just crank up the volume on his speakers. Over the holidays, the state of the house finally broke me. The wallpaper was peeling. A yellow stain bloomed on the ceiling from a leak Richard would have fixed the same day. So I spent my Christmas bonus on contractors. Got the house cleaned up, fixed, painted. In February, Mom sprained her ankle. I called to check in. "It's nothing," she said lightly, but I could hear the pain in her voice. "Is Tommy helping?" "He's busy. He has an online interview." The next morning, I hired a nurse. The vacation I'd been saving for, gone. Then came something I hadn't expected. I walked into the house and stopped cold. There was a stranger on the couch, if you could call her that. She looked like she stepped out of a reality show. Acrylic nails that could slash tires, a thick coat of makeup, clothes one sneeze away from falling off. She scrolled through her phone, surrounded by empty chip bags and soda cans. "And you are—" I asked, though I already knew. Tommy emerged from his room, smug. "This is Candy, my fiancée. She lives with us now." Candy didn't even glance up, just popped her gum and kept scrolling. I watched in mute disbelief as she reached into one of the grocery bags I had just brought in and pulled out the expensive cookies I'd picked out for Mom. "Lovely," I muttered. That night, I called Mom. "Oh, Lily." Her voice was bright, too bright. "Isn't it wonderful? Tommy's finally settling down. Candy is such a good influence. He hasn't had a drink with his awful friends in weeks." Because she's drinking all the good stuff at home, I thought, remembering the empty bottles of my imported beer in the recycling bin, but I said nothing. "And he's talking about a job again. Candy's cousin knows someone at an IT company." I nodded absently, the words washing over me like déjà vu. How many big breaks had Tommy promised? But Mom was lost in her own fairy tale, and I didn't have the heart to tear it down. Then came my next visit. I juggled grocery bags as I opened the door and stopped in my tracks. The house looked ransacked. Dishes overflowing, takeout boxes everywhere, dirty laundry decorating the floor. Candy lay sprawled on the couch like a queen without a throne, mindlessly tapping her phone. I slammed the bags onto the table. "You live here for free. You eat the groceries I pay for. You can't even do the dishes?" Candy slowly looked up, a smirk on her glossy lips. "And who the hell are you to bark orders? This isn't your house." My fists clenched. "I grew up here. You're just a guest." She laughed, loud, mocking. It sent a chill straight through me. "Oh, sweetie," she purred. "You really don't get it, do you? This house belongs to Tommy now. Your mom signed it over. There's a will and everything." I found Mom in the kitchen, hunched over a stack of discount coupons she'd never use. "Is it true?" My voice didn't sound like mine. "You made a will and left everything to Tommy?" She didn't look up, just kept fumbling through the papers with shaky hands. And then something in her face shifted. A hardness settled in her eyes. "Yes," she said, voice flat and deliberate. "It's true." For a second, I just stared at her, not fully understanding. "I'm the one helping you," I said slowly, as if reminding her of basic math. "I send you money every month. I take care of this house. Tommy, he doesn't work. He doesn't lift a finger. Don't you dare talk about your brother like that." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You never understood him. Not once." "Understand what exactly?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "That he's a parasite? That he lounges around while his girlfriend turns this house into a garbage heap?" "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she snapped. Her face twisted then into something unfamiliar, cold and ugly. And the next words, they didn't just sting. They broke me. "You want the truth? I've never loved you the way I love Tommy." Silence. Absolute. Stunned. "He's better than you at everything. Always has been. And I don't want to see you in this house anymore." It hit like a slap. The kind that stuns before it burns. All those years I'd spent convincing myself that she did love me. That buried somewhere beneath her worship of Tommy was a place for me, small, quiet, but real. And now I knew there had never been space. I turned, silent. Behind me, Candy's triumphant laugh rang out like a cruel bell. 21 years of hoping, of trying, of earning scraps of affection like a stray dog. And it all ended with the soft, definitive click of the front door closing behind me. The 4-hour drive home was a haze. I don't remember the highway, the stairs, the moment I collapsed onto the couch, but I remember the moment of clarity. My phone screen lit up. $1,500 transfer completed. I stared at it. My finger hovered for only a second before I hit cancel recurring payment. That was the last time. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. At first, it was just a distraction, a way to avoid the ache in my chest. But gradually, the void in my budget started to look like something else. Possibility. I researched investments. I began thinking about a house of my own. Not an apartment, not a rental. Something that belonged to me. Exactly a month after I walked out, the phone rang. "The money didn't come," Mom said, skipping over greetings like they were luxuries she couldn't afford. "There must be some mistake at the bank." "No mistake," I replied, calmly, shockingly so. "I canceled the transfers." There was a beat of silence. And then the storm. "What? How dare you? After everything I've done for you?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Everything you've done for me. You mean forgetting I existed? Letting me play maid while Tommy did nothing? Or maybe it was telling me, to my face, that you never loved me." "That's different," she snapped. There it was, the old familiar tone, defensive, self-righteous, manipulative. "You know I was just upset, but you can't just stop helping us. We need that money." "We?" I asked, my voice like ice. "Tommy and Candy, they're going to Cancun. It's a package deal." I nearly dropped the phone. "A vacation? Tommy needs a break. The stress—" "From what?" I cut in. "From video games? From drinking? Mom, Tommy doesn't need a vacation. He needs a job." Her voice turned shrill. "How dare you say that? You're just jealous." "Jealous? Of what? The house you gave him? The love you never gave me?" Her silence was louder than a scream. "Fine," I said, my voice low, final. "You made your choice. Let him take care of you now." You, she sputtered. "Ungrateful mercenary." Her words blurred into a tirade of shouting and accusations. I let her finish. Then I said, "Goodbye, Mom. Don't call me again." And I blocked her number. But she didn't stop. Within a week, she found new avenues, long, dramatic Facebook posts, tear-stained Instagram comments, guilt-drenched emails listing her many sacrifices for me. I couldn't recall a single one. Tommy chimed in next. "Mom's crying because of you," he wrote. "You better start sending money again, or else." I replied once. "Crazy idea. Try getting a job." Then I blocked him too. Even Candy tried her hand, on LinkedIn of all places. A full essay about how I was breaking poor Mom's heart and how Tommy was too sensitive for the pressure of work. I almost admired her imagination. It's been 6 months now. I don't know how they're doing. I don't ask. I don't care. Maybe Tommy finally realized that real life won't cater to him forever. Maybe they're still waiting for me to cave. Maybe they've already found some new sucker. None of it matters. What matters is that the $1,500 I used to send them is now tucked away in a fund for my house, for my future. What matters is that I sleep without waking to venomous texts, that for the first time in my life, silence feels like peace. Richard would be proud of me for finally choosing myself. The other day, I drove past a construction site. A sign read, "Laborers Wanted." For a second, I considered snapping a picture and sending it to Tommy. Instead, I just smiled and kept driving. Their chaos is no longer mine to clean up. For the first time in forever, I am free. Second story, Sarah and the Price of Silence. Lest there be any misunderstanding, Liam leaned forward, his voice dripping with arrogance. We wanted you to hear it from us first. Everything's going to us. His words hit like a sucker punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. Suddenly, the homemade lasagna on my plate, the same lasagna Mom had used to lure me back home, turned to lead in my stomach. The room fell into a weighted silence, pierced only by the faint hum of passing cars in the quiet suburban cul-de-sac. My heart thundered in my chest as I stared across the gleaming cherrywood table at my younger siblings, the twins, Liam and Leona. Both wore matching smirks, eyes lit with smug triumph. Excuse me? My voice wavered, betraying the storm rising inside me. What do you mean, everything? Exactly what he said, Sarah, Mom snapped, cutting in before Liam could respond. The smile she'd worn earlier vanished, replaced by a tight, stubborn line on her lips. Your father and I finalized the will. We wanted you to hear it straight from us. The lake cottage, the savings, everything goes to Liam and Leona. Both wore matching smirks, eyes lit with smug triumph. Excuse me? My voice wavered, betraying the storm rising inside me. What do you mean, everything? Exactly what he said, Sarah, Mom snapped, cutting in before Liam could respond. The smile she'd worn earlier vanished, replaced by a tight, stubborn line on her lips. Your father and I finalized the will. We wanted you to hear it straight from us. The lake cottage, the savings, everything goes to Liam and Leona. I turned to Dad, clinging to a shred of hope. Some sign this was a cruel joke, some flicker of hesitation. But he stared down at his cutlery like it held the answers to the universe, refusing to meet my gaze. The silence that followed was suffocating, stretching impossibly long until he finally spoke. His voice was flat, calculated. Sarah, you have to understand. This makes sense. He folded his arms, leaning back as if that gave weight to his logic. You've made a life for yourself. Your mother and I are proud of you, your career, your independence. But Liam and Leona, they're still finding their way. They need the support more. I blinked hard, willing the burn behind my eyes to disappear. Support? The word tasted bitter. For years, I'd carried the family's burdens in silence, as if being the eldest daughter had signed me into some invisible contract of sacrifice. Their mortgage, Liam's endless parade of universities, Leona's whims and designer habits, I'd paid for it all without asking for thanks. And now it all meant nothing? A heavy ache settled in my chest. I looked at my parents and saw only strangers. So this is my thank you for covering your mortgage for 4 years? My voice came low, steady, but edged with steel. What about the tuition bills? The $30,000 I spent fixing up the lake house last summer? This is exactly why we hesitated to tell you, Mom said with a dramatic sigh, shaking her head like I was a child having a tantrum. You always reduce everything to money, Sarah. That's not what family is about. A hot flush crept up my neck, my fists clenched under the table. Family has always come first for me, I shot back. Every sacrifice I made, every dollar, was because you said family sticks together. I believed you. Liam chuckled, leaning back in his chair with a cocky grin. You're acting like some kind of martyr. No one begged you to help. You just liked playing the hero. Leona laughed softly, twirling a glossy strand of hair around her finger. Her eyes sparkled with cruelty. Or maybe you thought throwing money at us would finally make Mom and Dad love you as much as they love us. Her words landed like daggers, slicing open wounds I'd spent a lifetime pretending didn't exist. And still, our parents didn't flinch. No reprimand, no defense, just silence. The same silence they'd always offered when the twins crossed a line. They'd spoiled Liam and Leona endlessly, forgiven every failure, turned every mistake into a lesson. And I was the stable one, the reliable one, the expendable one. The fury surged in me like a wildfire. "You're right, Liam," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "No one made me do it, and starting today, no one gets to make me feel guilty for no longer being this family's ATM. I'm done." I shoved back my chair. The screech of wood on tile jolted the room into stillness. For a brief second, the air smelled of roasted garlic and marinara, a cruel reminder of the night I thought might be warm, comforting. A reunion. Instead, it was an ambush. I didn't look back, just grabbed my coat, stormed into the hallway, and slammed the front door shut behind me, hard enough to silence them all. The cold Portland air slapped my face, a welcome shock that snapped my spiraling thoughts into focus. They had used me, exploited me, then tossed me aside when I was no longer convenient. In the car, my hands trembled as I clutched the steering wheel. The tears came fast, unstoppable, streaking down my cheeks as I drove through the quiet streets toward downtown. My mind replayed the evening on a loop, every cruel smirk, every word laced with betrayal, every sacrifice I'd made, every vacation I'd canceled, every sleepless night spent managing bills and balancing accounts. I did it out of love, a love I now realized had never been reciprocated. By the time I reached my apartment, the ache in my chest had calcified into something colder, heavier. I poured myself a glass of the good Cabernet, the kind I saved for milestones. This counted. Settling on the couch, I opened my banking app. Parents' mortgage, $1,800. Utilities, $600. I stared at the numbers glowing on the screen like accusations. Then, with 2 swift taps, I canceled them both. The confirmations popped up, and with them, a quiet surge of rebellion, of freedom. As night bled into early morning, I replayed the dinner again and again. The sting of rejection wasn't just about money. It was about being cast aside, unseen, unloved. But beneath the grief, something else had started to bloom. A sense of clarity, of power. They may have written me out of the will, but tonight I was writing myself out of their expectations, out of their guilt trips and manipulations. There would be fallout, of course, angry calls, guilt-laced messages, but I didn't care, because tonight everything changed. No matter how hard they pressed, how many guilt-laced words they flung at me, I made a silent vow. No more. No more being the dutiful daughter. No more swallowing disrespect dressed up as family obligation. From this moment forward, my life belonged to me. I finished the last bitter sip of wine, staring into the darkness with a hollow smile. They'd summoned me home to tell me everything was going to Liam and Leona. But what they really gave me that night was far more valuable than the lake house or any inheritance. They gave me freedom. I didn't sleep. I lay wide-eyed in the dark, staring at the ceiling of my apartment as my mind ran in endless circles. Rage, heartbreak, disbelief, looping again and again. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the curtains, indifferent to the storm unraveling inside me. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw it. Liam's smug face, Leona's sneer, and worst of all, my parents' stone-cold silence. It wasn't what they said, it was what they didn't. By morning, I felt hollow. The tears had dried somewhere between midnight and despair. I stumbled into the kitchen, brewed the strongest coffee I could muster, and sat at the table, the news muttering nonsense in the background. I didn't hear a word of it. Memories came at me unfiltered, like glass shards in a storm, merciless, cutting, clear. Had I really been so blind? Or had I just chosen not to see the truth? Clung to the fantasy that one day they'd appreciate me as more than a source of income? The phone buzzed sharply against the table. Mom. My stomach twisted. I let it ring into voicemail. I wasn't ready, not for her voice, not for her version of the story. A minute later, a notification blinked across the screen. Against every instinct I had, I pressed play. Sarah, stop being so dramatic. Her tone was that familiar mix of irritation and forced concern. Call me back. You know family doesn't do this to each other. A dry laugh escaped my lips. Family. Her favorite weapon. Family only mattered when it could be used against me. I deleted the message. The phone went face down. In the days that followed, the calls multiplied. First Mom, then Dad, then Liam and Leona, alternating between smug lectures and sarcastic guilt trips. Not one of them offered an apology, not even a hint of remorse, just a mounting frustration that their bank account had suddenly dried up. After a particularly venomous call from Leona accusing me of being jealous and selfish, I blocked them all. The quiet that followed was jarring, fragile, strange. But somewhere in that silence, a small flame of peace began to flicker. Still, under that delicate calm, the pain pulsed steadily, unyielding. I didn't know if it would ever fade, so I buried myself in work. Bennett Construction's latest venture, a sleek new medical complex in Sacramento, demanded every ounce of my energy. Meetings, designs, late-night client calls. It was everything I was good at, and everything I needed to forget. I worked late, volunteered for travel, anything to avoid the suffocating stillness of my apartment at night. 3 weeks passed without a single direct interaction from them, and foolishly, a part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, they'd accepted it, that they were finally learning to live without me, but deep down, I knew better. On Friday afternoon, a message flashed across my screen like a storm warning. Family meeting tonight. Sarah, you owe it to yourself to be there. My pulse spiked. Rage collided with disbelief. Owe it to myself? I didn't owe them anything. And yet, a part of me, the part that still believed in closure, in some kind of impossible reconciliation, responded before I could stop myself. Okay. Driving up to the house that evening, everything felt surreal. Liam's obnoxious motorcycle sat in the driveway like a threat. Next to it, Leona's electric blue Kia screamed for attention. The two of them were already on the porch, standing shoulder to shoulder like matching statues of entitlement. My stomach turned as I approached the front door, the same one I'd once opened with excitement. Now it looked foreign, hostile. Mom answered with a tight smile that barely disguised her irritation. Sarah, glad you could make it after all, she said, as if I were a guest and not her daughter. Aunt Daisy's here too. I blinked. Daisy sat quietly in the corner of the living room, her expression equal parts compassion and caution. She rarely got involved in family matters. Her presence unnerved me. I sat across from her, my heart pounding. Liam and Leona entered moments later, eyes full of judgment. Dad cleared his throat. We called this meeting to clear the air, he said stiffly. We thought you'd have come to your senses by now. Apparently we were mistaken. I clenched my fists under the table. Come to my senses? My voice trembled with disbelief. You cut me out. Completely. After everything I've done for this family. You're exaggerating, Mom scoffed. Yes, you helped. But it was your responsibility, as the eldest. I laughed, sharp, bitter. I built a career because you needed money. I sacrificed vacations, relationships, peace of mind. Also, you could pretend we were this perfect, functioning family." "Oh, spare us the theatrics," Liam sneered. "We never asked you to." "Exactly," Leona chimed in with a mocking smile. "You just liked being the martyr. Maybe if you'd spent less time playing savior, you'd actually have a life of your own." The humiliation rose like bile. Aunt Daisy shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. My parents stayed silent, their faces cold. That silence was my answer. I stood abruptly. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You're right," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "My mistake was thinking I mattered. I won't make that mistake again." At the door, Dad's voice rang out behind me like a final blow. "If you leave now, Sarah, don't expect to be welcomed back." I froze, hand on the doorknob. The rage I'd held back all my life erupted. "Was I ever welcome?" I asked, turning my head slightly. My voice was low, but it burned, because it sure as hell never felt that way. Outside, the stars blinked cold and distant. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unrelenting. Each step to the car felt heavier than the last, the truth anchoring itself deeper into my chest. They never valued me. I was only ever useful, replaceable, disposable. Back at my apartment, I locked the door with finality, not out of fear, but out of resolve. I would never let them hurt me again. I sat in the dark, the silence now a strange kind of comfort, thick, steady, protective. It wrapped around me like armor. Then a knock, soft, hesitant. It sent a jolt through me. Adrenaline surged as I approached the door. Through the peephole, I saw Aunt Daisy. Her face was drawn with worry, creased with the kind of sadness that comes from watching too much go wrong for too long. I opened the door without a word. She pulled me into a warm, firm embrace, and her voice trembled as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Sarah. They're wrong. You deserve so much more than this." Her words cracked something deep inside me. The tears came, fast and hot, tears I'd held back for years. Daisy just held me tighter, letting me fall apart in her arms, no judgment, only quiet understanding. After what felt like forever, she pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. "They're terrified, you know," she said, her tone edged with certainty. "Not of losing money, of losing control, of facing who they really are." Later, alone again, I stared at my phone screen. The numbers glared at me like ghosts. $1,800 for the mortgage, $600 for utilities. Transfer after transfer labeled family assistance. Silent sacrifices. My finger hovered over the cancel button. Guilt, familiar, heavy, coiled in my gut. My mother's voice echoed in my mind like a mantra turned curse. Family sticks together, Sarah. Family sacrifices. But that night had destroyed the illusion. Their betrayal was deliberate, ice cold, calculated. I wasn't a daughter. I was a convenience. Liam's smug face flickered in my memory, sealing my decision like a brand. I clicked. Mortgage canceled. One more click. Utilities gone. A gasp escaped me. Relief surged through my chest, so fierce and sudden it felt like air after nearly drowning. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't their lifeline. The chains snapped. I fell asleep on the couch, exhaustion devouring me, and woke to the lavender blush of dawn bleeding into the Portland skyline. Then the phone rang. My stomach clenched instantly. "Mom," I answered, bracing myself. "Sarah, what have you done?" she barked, skipping any pretense of greeting. Her voice was shrill with fury. "The bank called. They're threatening to take the house. You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in, my voice colder than I expected. "Mom, I paid that mortgage out of choice, not obligation, and now I choose to stop." "You're our daughter," she shrieked. "You owe us respect." "I don't owe you anything," I said, steel in my voice now. "Respect is earned. You made your choice. I'm making mine. Sarah, please." Her tone shifted, desperation creeping in, but I didn't flinch. "I'm done, Mom. I can't live like this anymore." I hung up. My hand trembled, but my resolve didn't. The calls kept coming. Dad. Leona. Even distant cousins I barely knew. They all tried. Guilt, shame, manipulation. I silenced the phone and left it that way. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Fragile? Yes. But real. Work became my refuge again. I buried myself in it. Late nights, business trips, full calendars. I booked the trip to Italy I'd always postponed. Finally, my life. Mine. Loneliness visited sometimes, like an old ghost. But it didn't haunt me, not the way my family had. Then came Sacramento. 3 days for final inspections on our medical complex. A perfect escape. Late Friday night, I returned home, exhausted, ready for a hot shower and my own bed. But something was off. My apartment door looked wrong. Foam, thick, gray, industrial, was hardened like concrete around the entire frame. Panic spiked. Someone had sealed me out. I touched it. Solid, cold, malicious. Only one person could have done this. Liam. My hands shook as I called the building management, pacing like a caged animal. Hours later, a tired locksmith arrived, whistling low as he examined the damage. "Someone really didn't want you getting in," he muttered, peeling the foam away with delicate precision. It was past midnight when I finally stepped back inside, but I didn't sleep. I was too angry, too awake. Then I remembered the hallway camera. I pulled up the footage, and there he was, Liam. Hoodie pulled up, baseball cap low, slathering foam onto my door with theatrical precision. A twisted smile on his face, like it was a game. The betrayal was no longer metaphorical. It was recorded. Real. I stared at the screen, fists clenched, bile rising in my throat. My own brother. A petty vandal in the night. Could I really turn him in? I called Aunt Daisy. Her answer came without hesitation. "If you don't stop him now, Sarah, he'll never stop. You're not protecting him. You're enabling him." The next morning, I walked into the police station and filed a report. I handed over the footage, and then the firestorm hit. Voicemails, texts, venomous, panicked, desperate. I was a traitor, vindictive, heartless. But I could hear it under the rage, fear. For the first time, they were powerless. I had broken the unspoken rule, never fight back. Liam was facing real consequences now. Charges weren't just a threat. They were imminent if he didn't make things right. Then Dad called. His voice was brittle, strained by the effort to sound composed. "What do you need, Sarah? To drop the charge?" $3,000, I said without hesitation. "The exact cost of the repairs?" "That's extortion," he snapped, outrage bleeding through his words. "No," I said, my voice colder than I expected. "It's justice. There are consequences. Liam trashed my home. He can pay or he can answer to the law. The choice is his." The silence crackled before he slammed the call shut. The next morning, a deposit hit my account. Exactly $3,000 attached to a venomous note. Last payment. Bitterness clung to every syllable, but still, a flicker of triumph surged through me. Not for the money, but for the principle. For once, they were forced to see it. Their actions had a cost. Liam's stupid, vindictive prank hadn't shattered me. It had sharpened me. I stood alone in the doorway of my freshly repaired apartment, the air still tinged with new paint and possibility. I drew in a breath, deep and deliberate. Yes, they had hurt me, betrayed me, pushed me past the edge. But in doing so, they unwittingly cut the tether that kept me orbiting them. Now I was free to build something for myself, on my own terms. After Liam's vandalism, the silence from my family was deafening. No texts, no phone calls, just a void where they used to be, one I thought would feel like peace, but instead pressed down like a weight. Weeks passed. Then came the whispers. Aunt Daisy called late one night, her voice a careful hush. "Sarah, your mom's been talking. She's telling people you abandoned them, that you're trying to leave your parents homeless." My stomach twisted. "That's insane," I breathed, my grip tightening on the phone. "I didn't have a choice." "I know," Daisy said softly, "but no one else does. They think you're selfish, that this is all about money." The accusation hit harder than I expected. A slow, searing pain settled in my chest. They were rewriting history, casting me as the villain in a story I'd spent years silently suffering through. Vacations canceled, goals postponed, dreams shelved over and over again, and now erased, just like that. I paced the apartment, anger building with every step. No more silence, no more hiding. If they wanted to paint me as the enemy, fine, but I was going to tell my side. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling, heart pounding. I started typing. I wrote it all. Every tuition payment, every mortgage installment, every demand from Leona, every reckless act by Liam, the vandalism, the betrayal, every silent sacrifice spilled out like blood from an old wound. And then I hit post. It didn't take long. Comments flooded in. Some offered sympathy, shock. Others threw stones, condemning me for airing dirty laundry in public. But at least the truth was out. Then her message came. "Mom, how dare you humiliate us like that? You have no right." Rage surged. I called her back instantly. "No right?" My voice trembled, but not with fear. "You lied to everyone. After everything I've done, you turned me into a villain just to protect your pride. You abandoned us," she hissed, "because we chose to support your brother and sister. They need us more." "No," I said, the words shaking but firm. "You abandoned me. You taught them to take and never give, and now you're paying for it." "You destroyed our family," she said, icy and final. I took a breath. "No," I whispered. "You did that all by yourselves." And I hung up. Tears blurred my vision. The guilt was relentless. Was I wrong for standing my ground? For demanding respect? Then, a knock on the door. Aunt Daisy. She pulled me into a wordless, aching hug. For the first time in forever, I felt held. "Your post changed everything," she said, stepping inside. "People are finally seeing the truth. Your mom kept your sacrifices hidden. Nobody knew." I inhaled shakily. "Does it even matter now?" She took my hand. "Yes," she said, fierce and gentle. "Your voice matters. They chose to lie, but you chose to be brave." Her words burrowed deep, dislodging the weight I'd been carrying. The longing began to loosen, replaced by something new. Hope. I wasn't silent anymore. And the truth, however messy, was mine. A few days later, a message from Leona flashed across my phone. "Thanks a lot. Everyone hates us now. Hope you're proud." I stared at the venom, but felt nothing. For so long, I had twisted myself for their approval. Bent, broke, sacrificed. Now, looking at her message, I realized their love had always been conditional. I typed back, steady and unflinching. "I'm done apologizing for your actions. Maybe now you'll finally grow up." She never replied. Weeks passed. The distant gossip eventually faded. My parents, cut off from my financial support, scrambled. Part-time jobs, mounting debts. Liam stayed Liam. Still irresponsible, still entitled. Leona remained bitter, unwilling to change. But me? My life began to bloom, quietly but fiercely. For the first time, my choices were mine. Not a compromise, not an obligation. Mine. They thought cutting me from the will would destroy me. But they had already given me everything I needed. The courage to choose myself. 6 months passed. The silence lingered, yes. At times it still echoed like a ghost. But I was no longer haunted. I was healing, free. But over time, the jagged edges of betrayal dulled, softened by a quiet, unexpected sweetness. The realization that I was finally free. I poured my energy into my career. The grind paid off. A promotion, a corner office, and a salary that once felt like a fantasy. For the first time, my money was mine. Every cent stayed with me, no longer drained by mortgage payments or siphoned off to patch up the latest Liam disaster or Leona melodrama. Each deposit into my account was more than income. It was validation. Choosing myself wasn't selfishness. It was survival. And with that newfound freedom, I did something radical. I booked a 2-week trip to Italy, a dream I'd shelved for years under the crushing weight of guilt and financial martyrdom. I stood on a balcony in Florence, the sun melting into the skyline, bathing the city in molten gold. A breeze brushed my face, and something inside me unclenched. For the first time in years, my joy wasn't tainted by obligation. It was just mine, pure, undiluted. Back home, I joined a hiking group, reclaiming weekends that had once been swallowed by family drama. It was on one of those hikes that I met Alex. Warm smile, steady eyes, and a calm that soothed my deepest aches. His quiet presence didn't try to fix me. He just saw me, and that, in itself, was healing. With him, I didn't have to earn love by sacrificing pieces of myself. Months passed in gentle waves. Then, on a chilly November evening, a knock disrupted the peace. I opened the door to Aunt Daisy, wrapped in her favorite oversized sweater, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. She stepped inside without a word and pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," she whispered, tears catching in her lashes. "You deserve all the happiness you've found." We sat quietly for a moment, wrapped in the kind of silence that feels like safety. Then Daisy's voice broke through, soft but resolute. "Your parents, they still blame you." She looked down, then back at me. "They're not going to change, but you have. You chose yourself. That takes courage most people don't have." I nodded slowly, the ache in my throat tightening. "I still think about them," I admitted, barely above a whisper. "Not because I want to go back, but because it hurts knowing they never loved me the way I loved them." Daisy reached over, gently taking my hand. "Sometimes, sweetheart," she said, "family isn't about blood. It's about the people who see you, who know your worth, and love you because of it, not in spite of it." Her words filled a space inside me I hadn't known was hollow. That night, we stayed up late, talking, laughing, piecing together stories like fragments of a life I was finally rebuilding on my terms. In the following weeks, whispers trickled in from distant relatives, echoes of a life I no longer had to live. My mother, exhausted and older than her years, was working early diner shifts. My father took a job at the hardware store, his hands too tired for the kind of labor his pride had once scorned. Liam had quit another job, still running from the mirror. Leona clung to filtered dreams of influencer fame, her fantasies growing more fragile by the day. On Christmas Eve, I didn't spend the night nursing regret or replaying memories like bruises. Instead, I opened my home to the people who chose me, friends who had become family. Laughter spilled into every corner, the warmth of connection wrapping around us like a soft blanket. And as I looked around the room, I understood. Home isn't where you're from. It's where you're finally free to be loved without conditions. The fire crackled softly in the background, casting dancing shadows on the walls as the party faded into cozy conversation and half-empty wine glasses. Someone strummed a guitar. Someone else was laughing in the kitchen. I stood for a moment, watching it all with a quiet heart. This was peace. A life not built on obligation or duty, but on truth, on connection, on choice. Later that night, as the last guest hugged me goodbye and the door clicked shut, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and looked out at the stillness of the snowy street. My phone sat silent on the coffee table. No texts, no guilt-laced voicemails, no midnight demands. And I didn't miss them. Not in the way I used to. Grief still lived somewhere deep inside me, curled like a stone. But it no longer controlled me. It no longer dictated who I had to be. I had mourned the family I never really had, and from that morning, I had built something new. My own life, my own legacy, no longer a ghost inside someone else's story. Alex eventually joined me, slipping an arm around my shoulder as we sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. I smiled, eyes still on the world outside. That I spent so long trying to belong to people who never saw me, and now I turned to him. Now I finally belong to myself. He nodded, kissed the top of my head. And that's more than enough. And he was right. If this story moved you, if it made you feel seen, or reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories waiting to be told, and I'd love to share them with you. Until next time, choose yourself, always.